Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the absolute biggest educational crises in recent memory, the total cancellation of the NEET UG 2026 exam. We're going to unpack exactly how the government's testing infrastructure fundamentally collapsed to allow a massive nationwide paper leak, and more importantly, we're going to look at the crushing mental toll this systemic failure has taken on millions of innocent students. Here is a quick look at how we're breaking things down today. We'll cover the cancellation itself, how the system failed, tracing the leak, the mental toll on students, the resulting protests, and finally, what happens next. All right, part 1, the NEET 2026 cancellation, a dream deferred. I really want you to think about this number for a second. 22.79 lock. That is how many medical aspirants had their entire futures put on a dead halt when the government scrapped this exam. We're not just talking about data points here. These are young people who gave up sleep, social lives, and literally years of their youth for a high-stakes test that is their only shot at undergraduate medical courses in India. So, what forced the National Testing Agency's hand after the May 3rd exam? It was a so-called guess paper making the rounds. But look, this wasn't just some lucky guess. Out of the 410 leaked questions, nearly 120 of them from the chemistry section, plus massive chunks of biology, matched the actual official exam word for word. The NTA's defenses were completely shattered, leaving them with absolutely no choice but to cancel the whole thing. Let's move on to part 2, how the system failed, and the glaring pattern of vulnerability. The truly heartbreaking part for the students, this is not an isolated glitch. It's a historical pattern of failure. In 2021, pre-exam leak reports messed with over 16 lakh students. Flash forward to 2024, you had Grace Smart controversies and more leak allegations hitting 24 lakh students. And now, in 2026, a total system breakdown forces a massive cancellation. You really have to ask yourself, why on earth hasn't the government fortified this infrastructure yet? And how did the criminals bypass the system this time? Well, they used sophisticated tech that made the government's defenses look ancient. The NTA relied on things like GPS-enabled transport vehicles and 5G jammers. The smugglers, they completely sidestepped that. They used high-definition portable scanners instead of trackable phones. They hid the data on a shadow server tied to an IT startup in Nashik. From there, it was funneled through encrypted Telegram channels to a network literally known as the private mafia. The government's analog defenses didn't stand a chance. Which brings us to part 3, tracing the nationwide leak from Nashik to Sikar. This syndicate was organized and they moved incredibly fast. The very first digital copy was generated in Nashik. It immediately jumped to Gurugram, then Jaipur, and deeply infiltrated the massive coaching hub in Sikar, Rajasthan. The leak spread like wildfire, reaching all the way to Kerala, Bihar, and Jammu and Kashmir. But you know what the crazy irony is? This hyper-sophisticated operation was blown wide open because a student in Kerala casually forwarded the paper on WhatsApp to his dad in Sikar. Just one text message unraveled the whole thing. Now, why take this risk? Simple. Massive financial incentive. Investigators found out that a student in Nashik allegedly bought the paper for 10 lakh rupees and immediately flipped it to a buyer in Haryana for 15 lakh. It just goes to show how lucrative this underground market is. It is completely commodified government exams. Let's pivot to part 4, which is arguably the most vital piece of this puzzle, the mental toll on students, the real human cost. The absolute true scandal here isn't just the leak. It's the severe mental pressure crushing these young minds. Just listen to this raw comment from a medical student Reddit community. Imagine revising the entire syllabus because someone else revised the question paper early. That completely nails the frustration, doesn't it? Honest kids put their lives on hold for years, only to realize their blood, sweat, and tears were completely undermined by someone with enough cash to buy the answers. It's a devastating betrayal. Take Sudhanshu, an aspirant from Jharkhand who was actually expecting an incredible score of over 650. He brings up a massive psychological burden, the absolute dread of a re-exam. For top performers, exam day is a very fragile mix of intense preparation and peak on-the-day performance. Now they are living in sheer terror that their best effort might just be wiped out by bad luck on the day of the retest. The government's failure has essentially robbed them of their hard-earned confidence. And honestly, nothing screams systemic failure quite like the official advisory the NTA released around the exam. It literally juxtaposes standard bureaucratic reassurances about exam integrity right next to a national psychiatric helpline, the Telemanus 14416 number. when the very government agency administering a test has to proactively link to a mental health crisis line? Well, that is a glaring admission of the toxic pressure cooker environment their own incompetence has created. All right, Part 5. Protests and legal battles, demanding accountability. As you'd expect, people are furious, and the backlash is unified. Student bodies like the AVVP, NSUI, and SFI have been out on the streets physically protesting, literally breaching police barricades outside NTA offices. The political opposition is heavily condemning the collapse. But perhaps most significantly, medical associations are taking the legal route, demanding immediate, foundational overhauls of the entire system. Naturally, this fight went straight to the Supreme Court. The petition filed by FIMA, the Federation of All India Medical Association, is a massive deal. They are arguing that the current setup is fundamentally broken, calling it out directly as a systematic failure. They're explicitly asking the Supreme Court to force a shift to a digitally locked, computer-based test model, arguing that having the government handle physical paper tests is just way too vulnerable to corruption in this day and age. Finally, Part 6. What happens next? The road to the re-exam. So, where do these 22 lakh students go from here? Logistically speaking, the NTA is trying to smooth things over. Fresh dates should be dropping soon, students won't have to pay any extra fees or re-register, and their city choices stay exactly the same. At the same time, the Central Bureau of Investigation is conducting massive nationwide raids across 7 states, actively hunting down the masterminds behind the syndicate. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. Sure, we can arrest the bad guys, and yes, we can hold a re-exam. But is a retest really going to restore the mental peace of 22 lakh traumatized students? Can it restore trust in a fundamentally vulnerable government testing infrastructure? Or are we just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms of a much, much deeper disease in our educational system? Thank you so much for joining me, and keep questioning everything.